Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Alexey, and today I have a special guest, multi-platinum producer and mixer Ulrich Wild. Ulrich Wild is a wonderful metal producer who worked with such great bands as Pantera, Static X, White Zombie, Deftones, and many more. Today what we're gonna be doing is talking about his career, and of course we're gonna be talking about his brand new course on ProMix Academy, which is called Mixing Static X with Ulrich Wild. I hope you like the video, and please don't forget to check out Ulrich Wild's courses on ProMix Academy. So the first question is how you became a sound engineer.
I came up in the recording studios back in the late 80s, early 90s. I was in a recording school that wasn't terribly good. And I just picked up the phone and I called every recording studio and asked them if they needed help. And one of them was crazy enough to say, yes, come on down. And I started to be a runner, a gopher. And after a while, they started to put me in the room to observe and then become an assistant engineer and then, get paid and just work my way up. And that was in San Francisco. A big shout out to the Alpha and Omega Studios that was owned by Sandy Perlman, Blue Oyster Cult producer. Nancy Evans was the studio manager who gave me my first, foot in the door. And then, I just kind of went from there, working up there a little bit as assistant engineer and sometimes engineering a little bit. I was just learning my chops around the studio. And at some point I decided I needed to move to LA. And I did. It was a bit rough in the beginning. But then I got an assistant, actually a runner job at Alpha and at One on One Studios, where Metallica was making their Black record, and went from there and moved up to assistant engineer there. And then at some point met Terry Date, who took me under his wing. And I left. I went to Larrabee too for about a year of assisting before it was time for me to move on to full-time engineering and then producing as the next step up.
Thank you so much. My second question is how you got into mixing metal music.
Kind of hand in hand with how I became an engineer, since Terry Date took me under his wing. First of all, I was always a metalhead, so that there was always kind of a no-brainer in some ways that I would be enjoying the metal and working in metal. But then the recording studio I was at, One on One Studios, and don't forget, this was the late 80s, early 90s where metal was huge. Even in San Francisco with Exodus and bands like that. And then One on One was a big metal tracking studio. After Metallica left, there were tons of metal bands that came through, and it was just kind of part of my lifestyle at that point, assisting metal records, especially drum tracking sessions. And then once Terry Day took me under his wing, it was he did a lot of metal, almost exclusively, and that was just kind of like my trajectory was that, into metal. And I didn't mind because, as I said, it was a metalhead, still am.
Thank you so much. So all of my next questions will be based on your Mix and Static X course. So my next question is, what is your opinion on using drum samples in production of metal drums?
Yes. Do it. Don't do it. Whatever makes you happy, whatever gets you the result you need, whatever is called for by the song, by the project, by the artist, by yourself, how you feel, what you feel is needed to get you to come up with the tones that, will complement what's going on. If that is minor augmentation with a little bit of support from samples, or just full-on sound replacement because it needs to just sound machine-like. Anything goes, really. That's kind of like the rule, that anything goes. Because if you make yourself, it's like, if if you're like a never kind of, I'll never do that, then you're just cutting out a whole slew of possibilities and opportunities.
Thank you so much. My next question is, what tips can you give on making drums sound huge in the mix? So in this case, I'd like to ask not only about parallel compression or parallel distortion, but what tips can you give about recording drums to make them sound huge in the mix when it comes to metal?
Well, the most important part is a well-tuned drum kit and new heads. That is a given. Obviously sometimes your heads wear out and you're stuck with, less than ideal situations, but ideally you have new heads and well-tuned drums and a drummer who can make those drums sing by hitting them properly. And by hitting them properly, it's not necessarily hard, but like hitting in the right spot, hitting, with the right amount of attack. I don't know what this is, always beeping. I'm sorry. Hitting them with the right amount of attack, not overplaying the cymbals. That's a big one. And if the drummers hit the cymbals too hard, then they become too loud and too washy, and they overpower the actual drum kit itself. So those are the main things about like the playing of the drums. I'm a less is more kind of a guy when it comes to recording the drums. Like I don't like too many microphones. I mean, I do close mic everything, but I don't use 2 or 3 mics on a kick or a snare. It's one. It's one mic on the kick, one mic on the snare, one mic on the tom, not the top and the bottom. 2 overheads, couple of spot mics if they need them for like splashes or chinas, and a hi-hat and a ride or something like that. And then a couple of room mics. That's it. I don't do, I've seen setups where like top and bottom of cymbals are being mic'd, and the more mics you have, the more phase issues you'll have between them. So I try to just cut that out as much as possible. The other thing is an important thing is to check the phasing issues by just soling the overheads and having the drummer go back and forth on all the cymbals, hi-hats, rides, chimes, everything in between, just to see if there's any washing going on between the microphones. Also put it in mono to make sure there's no washing going on. So that's a big one that I always do. The other thing is, pointing the mics at the drums and away from the cymbals. Like placing let's say the snare mic in such a way that the back of the mic points towards the hi-hat, so it picks up as little of the hi-hat as possible, to control the bleed that way, and it holds true for like tom mics and but really there's no big mystery in the whole thing. That's about it. Like point the kick mic at the beater, have a little bit of dampening in the kick drum, not too much, not too little, just a little bit of experimentation goes a long way. I found that my ideal padding for a kick drum is actually an IKEA bath mat. That seems to work really well. It's this one little mat that's a little tufty kind of thing, and it's just the right size and does the right amount of dampening, and you always use that.
Thank you so much. So in your course, you used virtual amps to create a good metal tone for guitars. But what is your opinion on using impulse responses to create a good metal tone for guitars?
I think impulse responses is where it's at, because it's almost like inviting an engineer into your studio to do a little tweaking on your sound. if I make my own impulse responses, and I did, I have a couple of them that are available out there. I have my own mic placement. I have my own speakers. I do my own EQing, and if I can add that into the amp sim and replace what's there with a thing that I did, I'm just that much closer to having a guitar sound that I like, because it's kind of I'm kind of engineering the amp sim, if you will, by adding that IR, my own IR in there, which is what I did with some of the sounds in the chorus. Now, obviously, you can get other people's IRs and everything, and I think that is a really good way of getting kind of like their input on your sound.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So my next question is, what tips can you give on creating good metal guitar tone? So in this case, again, I'd like to ask about recording process of guitars.
Oh, funny you should mention that. I just got done doing a whole guitar setup course for the for Christians, for
Christian
the Coley audio cult. I just wrapped that up, and you can really go down into the details of different speakers, different mics, different preamps, all that stuff. It's, to sum it up, it's find the right speaker, find the right microphone, and play well. That is the main thing. I think, like the preamps, as I was demonstrating in that course, are have very little to do with the sound of the guitar. It adds a little coloring and all that stuff, but it's not the main focus. Microphones are a good place to start changing out microphones. I'm partial to the 57 and the 421s. They always seem to work for me. There's other ones, but those are always a good start. I place them in front of the speaker, kind of halfway between the little round coney in the middle and the edge, like halfway in between. And that's usually where I have them. And then, there's the V30s are the speakers of choice for metalheads. We're very much been trained to accept those as our go-to speakers, but there's so many other ones. So, just because one speaker doesn't do it for you doesn't mean the whole cabinet's the same thing. Like, there's lots of variations even between the same manufacturers or the same speakers. So, like, dig around to find one that sounds better than the others for that particular tone. But the main thing, and then you have guitar amps. Obviously, guitar amps have their own signature and their own sound and everything. But really the thing is the playing. It's so much of the guitar sound itself is the playing. You could have a sound, like a guitar sound that's kind of mediocre, just like, it's a decent sound, but it's nothing special. But you can have a great player on that rig, and it'll be fantastic. It'll sound fantastic. Or you can have a crappy player on a great rig, and it'll just be really horrible to listen to. So a lot of it is just the playing, and with that, like, I'd say about 80% of the guitar sound is actually the guitar player's right hand of how he picks the strings.
Thank you so much. I totally agree. So the next question is how to make your guitar sound wider in the mix, and maybe it's again about recording process and maybe applying some plugins.
I'm a big fan of having doubled guitars, one performance on the left, one performance on the right, identical in nature, and that is the same guitar, the same player, the same microphone setup, the same amps, everything's identical except for the actual performance. Each performance should be able to stand on its own if you take the other one away. It's not like, I wouldn't want to have it so like it only sounds good when it's doubled. It should sound good on its own, right? And so when it's doubled, it sounds like really massive because it's tight, it's played well together, it's one performance. It becomes one guitar in that sense, right? And so I think that is the best way for me to get as much width as possible. The an important thing about it is to carve out some space for the snare and the bass and everything else that goes, vocals, of course, that goes on in the mix. So you want to make space in the guitar sound for these other elements of the mix to poke through, and that if you take some of that boxiness away with EQing, and some scratch, maybe where the snare has a lot of pop, you take some of the scratch out of the guitar so the snare can pop out there. That gives it a little bit more space, and it'll appear wider that way.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My next question is, what equipment did you use for recording Wayne's vocals for Static X Hollow Soul?
That was quite some time ago, but I do remember one thing very vividly, which was they had just come off a tour, and his voice was warm. It was good. It was ready to go, and he wanted to sing every day. So obviously in rehearsal and pre-production, that was not an issue. But once it comes to tracking drums and guitars and bass, there's kind of a little bit of downtime for vocals. So what we did every day, we had him run through a song twice, just to have him, have his vocals going. And we used that opportunity to audition every single microphone in the studio. So every day he ran through the song, whatever song it was, twice. And we started with the typical microphones, like the C12s and it's just everything that they had available. I don't even remember which ones, they have. There was Glenwood Place. They had every microphone you can imagine. We ended up running out of microphones that like proper vocal microphones. So we used, 57s and betas and 421s and, whatever else we could find. And then ended up with the Coles ribbon mics, the ones that look like a mitten, and it's like, what else are we going to do? And wouldn't you know it, those dumb things were perfect. They just were the right fit for him at that time. And that ended up being our vocal mic.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much.
As far as the preamps are concerned, I'm sure, I don't remember, it was tracked in an Eve. That's what they had in there. So I'm quite certain it was an Eve preamp, probably 1073 or 1081 or something like that was in there. And I usually double compress, usually two 1176s or an 1176 and LA2A or something like that. And just kind of one of them for taking the quick hits and the other one just to level it out a bit more and just get it kind of nice and smooth sounding.
Nice. Thank you so much. And my next question. So in your Mixing Static X course, you mostly used plugins, but how often do you use analog gear for mixing?
For mixing, I do everything in the box. There's no analog anything coming in and out of the box while I mix. I mix in Logic, as you know from the courses. But Jesus, it's supposed to be like, I apologize. I have no idea that this is supposed to be on like do not disturb and turned off, and it just doesn't work.
It's okay.
Technology is not on my side today. But speaking of technology, back to the program here. I mix in the box entirely, exclusively. I don't find myself enjoying chasing settings and on analog gear outside. I used to when I first started in like 2006, when I first started mixing in the box and using Pro Tools and Logic. I found myself having outboard gear, but ended up abandoning that whole thing because it's just not doing it for me while mixing. I don't mind like running out and back into while I'm recording things and producing a record. If anything goes. But I find that nowadays all the tools I have at my disposal in the box is all I need to get things the way I want them to sound.
Thank you so much. And my final question is, what tips can you give on getting metal clients for young sound engineers?
Yeah, that is that kind of leads us back around to the beginning.
Yeah.
It's hard. Your first client is hard to get. And I don't know if I have any tips. We're in the service industry, and it's hard for people to try new things. It's hard for people to trust new guys. Trust the new guy. In like early on, I think it makes a lot of sense to do a trial mix. I hate to say spec mix, but sometimes you need to throw them a bone to show them what you can do, and maybe that sort of thing will work just so you can start building a resume of like, look, this is what I can do, and show it to other people. So maybe that is a good way to go about things. Trusting the new guy as an artist, they have their budget, their money, they want to have a sure thing. And then the new guy comes along and you don't know, you take a leap of faith. It's all about people, talking to people and getting to know them and realizing that you're there to help them, as a producer, as a mixer, as opposed to, you trying to use them or take their money for no reason, or, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just a weird little world that we live in. But persistence is just a huge thing in this business. Be there when the other guy isn't, when the other guy can't make it, and you're there to save the day. That is usually a big one. I've ended up doing that a lot. But yeah, it's hard.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation. It's a huge honor to have you on my YouTube channel, and not only on my YouTube channel, but to talk to you. Because I watched only one of your courses, but I watched, of course, all of your previous courses just a little bit, And also you have a course on mixing music from Detklok. Yeah, I was back in the days, I was a huge fan of Detklok, Great cartoon.
Yes, that's a fun course. There's a lot of guitar tracks to wrap your head around on that one.
Yeah, Brandon Small is a pure genius,
Yes, case. He is. He's a very talented man.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.